This lecture presentation involves the fourth of our 5 moral principles, the principle of justice. This principle, in quick summary form, requires us to treat people as they deserve to be treated. It requires us to give people all that to which they are entitled, or that which they merit or deserve. And finally, it requires us to treat people fairly. As evocative as those ideas are, they don't really tell us a whole lot. We're going to have to think really hard to determine what people deserve, what they are entitled to, what it means to treat them fairly. And we're probably never going to come to complete agreement about all that. Still, this is a helpful place to start in thinking about what justice involves. A second thing to say here is with reference to a distinction between personal and social morality and ethics. Surely we have beliefs and make judgments about individual conduct, individual character, and the goods towards which an individual life should be directed. But we also make those same judgments with reference to social life, the policies and practices of institutions, we might say. The principle of justice is particularly relevant to our moral evaluation of those social and institutional policies and practices. Those policies and practices that affect not simply one or two people individually, but large groups of people. Justice is particularly relevant when it comes to our moral evaluation of the most basic institutions of our social and political and economic life together. The form and practices and policies of our government, the forms by which we organize economic life and produce and distribute income and wealth and prosperity. Justice is particularly relevant to our moral evaluation of these matters. Philosophers in the West have long argued for a close relationship between justice and equality. And clearly one of the things that characterizes the way you and I probably think about matters of justice involves a commitment to the idea that somehow there is this close relationship. Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, was probably the first to try to define justice, and he defined it as treating equals equally. And of course, by implication, treating unequally those who are unequal in some important way. Or think about the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Now, I would want to quibble with Mr. Jefferson's sexist language here. It's not that all men are created equal, but that all people are created equal, and governments are instituted among all of us, and not just those who are male. But notice the clear affirmation of the idea that somehow we are all equal, and that equal is reflected in each of us holding certain unalienable rights, presumably equal rights, and that the very purpose of government, so you see this connection between justice, equality, and the evaluation of government. The very purpose of government is to secure, protect, defend these equal rights among all human beings. Clearly, a close relationship between justice and equality. In affirming the idea that all people are equal in some significant way, that we all have certain equal rights, that government should treat us equally in the preservation and protection of those equal rights, Is Mr. Jefferson and Aristotle before him and all those who have affirmed a close relationship between justice and equality saying that all people are exactly the same? And by implication, are they saying that each of us has to be treated exactly the same in the social practices, institutional practices, political practices over which we are governed, or by which we are governed and under which we live? Well, the answer is, of course, no. I mean, Mr. Jefferson and Aristotle and others have clearly recognized that there are a multitude of ways in which we are different. Some of us are male, some of us are female. We come from different races, different ethnicities, different cultural backgrounds. We have different beliefs, different abilities, different values, since we can each think, choose, value, and act for ourselves. What they are affirming is not that we are exactly the same and that we must be treated exactly the same, but that we are the same, at least in certain fundamental, morally relevant ways. And there's a critical bite to this claim that all human beings are equal in some significant ways. And that is this, that many of the differences among us that have been used to justify treating people differently are mistaken. That it is an injustice to treat people differently on the basis of many of those differences. It's an injustice because though we may be different with regard to race and gender, for example, or abilities of different types, for example, it is wrong to discriminate between people on the basis of many of those differences. Why? Because in more fundamental and important ways, we are all the same. We are equal. This recognition of a close relationship between justice and equality, even as we also recognize that we are not, in fact, all exactly the same, means that in thinking about justice, we have to figure certain things out. We have to figure out what are those respects in which, in fact, we are all equal or the same. And then, how is that sameness or equality morally relevant? What are those natural or human rights that we all have simply because we are human beings? And what does this imply with respect to how we should be treated equally by others, particularly the government? But then we must also think about what differences among us in fact, do justify our being treated differently. Well, this is enough by way of introduction to the principle of justice. In our next couple of presentations, we will look at the relationship between justice and rights, and particularly the idea of natural rights as a way of trying to define those ways in which all human beings are equal or the same. After those presentations, we will return to considering this difficult question of what differences among us then do in fact justify differential treatment and make differential treatment just, despite all the ways in which we are equal.